I'm so excited for you to join me for this summer house tank today. I have made it in several different weights of yarn, and today we will be doing a camera version of it in the DK weight. But first I want to talk about these other weights of yarn. This white one I made with a comfy fingering weight of yarn. I've also swatched with a couple other of yarns and other yarn brands that I've put as the substitutes for this that will work great as well. The nice thing is this pattern is totally flexible, so you can really just raid your stash if you want to. Then I made a sport weight in this yarn from lovecrafts.com. This is the Mila Mia yarn. It's a virgin wool. This one is a cotton. This is a wool. So this is where I'm saying this pattern is so flexible in terms of fiber as well. You can choose your favorite fiber for this one, no matter what weight you're doing it in. Then I have this worsted weight one, which is more like an Aran weight. This is in, I got this from also Lovecrafts, but it's a Barocco Ultra Alpaca, and it's quite nice as well. I'm also making this one currently in a worsted weight acrylic, because this is a wool one. I also want to show you what it looks like with an acrylic with the Lion brand color theory. So that will be in photos as well. Today on camera, I'm going to be showing this in the Kind Feather from Hobby. This is 100% premium acrylic. I just want to make sure we get a variety of yarns in here so you can see it in different things. I did swatch it in the Lion brand Feels Like Heaven, and it swatched perfectly as well for the DK weight. So you can choose, like I said, a variety of yarns in different weights for this pattern. Now today on camera, I'll be making this in the size medium using the Kind Feather from Hobby. They have lots of different colorways that are absolutely gorgeous. This is a fun yarn to try out as well. But I also want to mention that this is written in 3 different lengths. So you can do it in whatever length that you're comfortable with, from a 7-inch to an 11-inch. So 7 inches, 9 inches, and 11 inches in length. So it can be a longer tank if you want. But you can even cut off and do shorter stitches. By I mean cut off, I don't mean literally. I mean when you start your starting chain, we're going to talk about this, you're just going to chain less and then work from there. So let's go ahead and get started with this and talk about what else you might. Now gather your supplies for whichever yarn weight and sizing you're going to be using for this. So if you are using a different yarn, you will be using a different size hook that is appropriate for that yarn. Since we're doing a DK weight today, I'm using a 4mm dot hook from We Crochet. You will also want a yarn needle to weave in those ends and scissors to cut your yarn. And then if you want to do any custom adjustments, which is really easy, do not be afraid to do custom adjustments for this pattern. Grab a tape measure so that you can measure areas of your tank top to see what you like best. And you can also hold it up to your body as we go. Now the construction for this tank top is actually a flat construction. We're not working in the round. So we're going to be starting with one side of these puff stitches. We'll start doing these puff stitches, working this all the way around as a flat piece that will just simply fold over and seam. And so then it's really easy to do because we're not even working in the round and we're only doing increases along the front one edge. It's a really fun pattern to do and it works out quite nicely and it looks really cute on. Then to finish it off, we will be making this fun strap. You don't have to do it this way. I just think it's really cute and kind of matches the puff stitches along the side. I'll show you how to do that and attach those and then you wear it. So let's get started. Now on camera today, I will be making the size medium, which will be more loose fitting on me, but I want to show it in that size. And I will also be making it a 9-inch length so that we can see a different length happening there too. So for the 9-inch length in size medium, I'm going to go ahead and make a slip knot, place that onto my hook, and then I will chain 48 stitches. Now these first 2 rows we're about to do will be the trickiest ones, partly because we don't have a lot to hold on to in terms of fabric when working these stitches, but I do like to start it with the puff stitches because when we come back around, it helps to hide our seam along one side of these puff stitches. We're going to start by working into the very first chain from the hook. And I will be working these into the back humps, but it really doesn't matter. It's whatever you are comfortable with. And we're going to do a single crochet stitch into that very first chain. Then I'm going to go ahead and mark it because it is always a good idea to mark your first stitch of your row. And now we're going to be skipping the next stitch and single crocheting into the next. And now this next step is the tricky part. We're going to be working a puff stitch into this skipped stitch. To do this, we're going to yarn over insert our hook into that skipped chain stitch, then yarn over and pull up a loop. We want to pull that loop to be the height of the first yarn over on our hook. Then we're going to do that again. We're going to yarn over, insert into that skipped stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop and pull it up to the same height as the first loop on the hook. And now we're going to do that one more time. If you don't want as puffy of puff stitches, you can stop the puff stitch right here, but I'm going to do it one more time, really to make these shine on the sides of this tank. Yarn over and pull up that loop. And now we have a total of 7 loops on the hook, but we are going to yarn over and pull through the first 6. And then we're going to yarn over and pull through the remaining 2. So we only worked 1 stitch there, but by doing that yarn over at the very end and pulling through 6, then 2, I think it makes the puff stitch a bit more defined, and that's why I do it. But if you prefer to yarn over and pull through all the loops on the hook, you can. Now we're going to be repeating that all the way across, making sure that we know what stitch we've used, and now we're going to look at the next 2. So we're going to skip the next stitch and single crochet into the next. And now we're going to go back to that skipped stitch and we're going to work a puff stitch into that skipped stitch. Making sure that every single time you yarn over and pull up a loop, you're pulling that to be the height of the first yarn over on the hook. And now that I've done all of the yarn overs and I have 7 loops on my hook, I'm going to yarn over and pull through 6, and then yarn over and pull through 2. And this is going to be our repeat all the way across until the very last stitch in this row. So once again, that's skipping a stitch, single crocheting into the next, going back to that skipped stitch, that skipped chain. And this row will be the longest row for me, partly because going into those chain stitches and making sure that I'm just working into the chain stitch is time consuming. Oh, and see, I missed it. I'm just trying to go through that back hump and not the whole thing. And then I'm going to do my puff stitch. So this stitch will take me the longest this row will be, but I promise it does get faster after these first couple rows. Here's my puff stitch. And I'm going to keep doing that all the way across until I get to the last stitch. Once you've worked your puff stitches all the way across, you will have 1 chain remaining, and we are simply going to be single crocheting into that last chain and then turning our work. And we're going to repeat this row one more time, but this time it will be a little bit easier because we have a bit better stitches to work into. So we're going to start by doing a chain 1 and tightening that down. That's our turning chain, does not count as a stitch. Then we can go ahead and single crochet into the first and mark that first stitch again, just best so that we don't lose stitch count, because our stitch counts will remain the same when we're making these puff stitch. So it's still 48 stitches. Now I'm going to skip the next stitch and single crochet into the next, and then go back to that skip stitch, which is a little bit easier this time since it's not a chain and it's an actual stitch. And we're going to do a puff stitch into that, and then keep on going. So we're doing the same thing again, where we skip a stitch and single crochet, go back to the skip stitch and do a puff stitch, and then we'll keep repeating those 2 steps, skipping a stitch and single crocheting, going back and doing a puff stitch. We're going to do that all the way to the end until we get to the very last stitch of the row, which we will once again single crochet into that last stitch. And now that I've completed all the puff stitches, we have 1 stitch left, which is why it's good to mark it because it can kind of get hidden there. And then we are going to single crochet through the last stitch of this row and turn our work. Make sure that you still have the same stitch count that we started with. And so for this one, it is 48 stitches when I'm doing the 9-inch length. Now I'm going to work this next row, and this is row 3 of the puff stitch section. But the nice thing about this row is it's really, really simple. So we are going to do a stacked single crochet into the very first stitch. Now stacked single crochets really help to make the edges crisp. We don't need to do any chains with these, so we're substituting chain stitches on the ends with a stacked single crochet. To do this, we're going to enter the very first stitch of the row, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. We've just completed a single crochet stitch, but we're going to go back to this left bar here, the one that's farthest to the left, insert our hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. And that is our stacked single crochet. That's our first stitch of the row. And we're definitely going to want to mark this stitch because it's very easy on the edge here that looks nice to work around and add stitches that aren't part of our stitch count. Then I'm simply going to half double crochet into each stitch across, so a total of 48 stitches on this row, working them in the half double crochet stitch. And that will complete the very first section of this, the puff section, and I will come back once I have this row complete and we will start doing our very first increase section. Now we're going to be doing row 1 from our first increase section. And if you're comfortable with this side that's not going to be increasing, you can take out your stitch marker as long as you know where your stitch is. But the smarter thing to do, grab a different color. The reason why is that way you'll know that we will always be increasing on this side as we work these rows. You don't want to miss one of the increases. So to get started with row 1 from the first increase section, we're going to do a stacked single crochet into our very first stitch and of course mark it. And then we're going to half double crochet into the same stitch. So there we've done one increase. So now for the rest of the stitches in this row after that increase, we are going to be working them in the third loop. I'd like to work the very first stitches here on the edge through both loops. I find it makes it a little bit cleaner, but you can work it through the third loop if you want. But now we're going to be working the third loop, and I want to talk to you about what the third loop is. When we're working half double crochets in rows like we're currently doing, we have this loop that is on the back of our work when we're making the stitch. So this is the right side of the half double crochets, and if we look at the back side of them, there's this third loop. So it's not the V from the top. That's how we would normally enter our stitch. It's this third loop that's facing us right here. When we work in that, it makes it look like a knit look on the front. So we're going to work the remaining stitches of this row in half double crochets into that third loop. Now work these all the way across, and at the end of this row, we have increased our stitch count by 1. Now on the last stitch of the row, I do like to work it through both loops because I feel like it makes a cleaner edge, but that's completely up to you. You can work it in the third loop if you want. And now for row 2 of the increasing rows, I'm going to start by doing that stacked single crochet, and you can mark that stitch. And then I'm going to work the half double crochet in the third loop all the way across until we get to that very last stitch. So work it all the way across until we get to that very last stitch. And now that we are at the very last stitch of the row for row 2, we are going to do another increase. So we're going to do 2 half double crochets into that last stitch, and that increases by 1 again. So then I'm going to turn my work, and we're going to be repeating rows 1 and 2 for the size medium until we have a total of 16 rows for this section. That means that we will be increasing the stitch count to a total of 64 stitches for the 9-inch length. Now it will be a different stitch count if you're doing a different length, but for the size medium and the 9-inch length, we'll increase until there are 64 stitches and a total of 16 rows for this section, repeating row 1 and row 2, and then we'll come on back. Now that we have done the 16 rows of increasing, we have this point up here, and that's exactly what we want. So we've done our first section of increasing, and now it is time for us to do our first section of decreasing. Now for some sizes, you're not going to be ending this row on the point at the top. You might be ending this row down here on the bottom, and that's okay. I've written instructions for both, and it could depend on what yarn size you're using, how many rows you're doing, or the size of this top. For this one in size medium to DK weight, we are ending right here because we worked even. But like I said, if you had worked an amount of odd rows for the first increasing section, you would be ending down here, but all these same instructions still apply. Now for us to start the first row of decreasing, we've turned our work we're going to be decreasing the first 2 stitches, but since we're starting with a stacked single crochet, I want to show you how to do a decrease. If you want to use a different style, feel free. So I'm going to insert my hook into the first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2. Then we're going to insert into that left horizontal bar, yarn over and pull up a loop, and pause right here. We're not going to complete this yet. We're going to go ahead and insert our hook into the third loop of the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then we can yarn over and pull through all 3, and that does a decrease stitch for that stacked single crochet. So that's a stacked single crochet decrease. We've decreased 1 stitch. Placing my marker so I don't lose my spot, we will go ahead and do half double crochets into the third loop in the remaining stitches across, and this row will be decreased by 1 stitch count. And now after completing row 1 of the decrease section, we're going to turn our work, and row 2 we're going to start with a stacked single crochet because we're working along the bottom edge here, so we're just going to be working these stitches. And now I'm going to work a half double crochet into that third loop until I get to the last 2 stitches of row 2 for the decrease section. So now that we are to the last 2 stitches of the second row of the decreasing section, I'm going to go ahead and move my stitch marker, and I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into the first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then you're just going to simply go into that last stitch, yarn over and pull through all the loops on the hook to do a half double crochet decrease. Then we're going to turn our work. Now we're going to be repeating the decrease section for a total of 16 rows in this section. So we're doing 16 rows again for the size medium. It will be a different row count depending on what size you're working on. And since I'm working the 9-inch length, that will bring this back to a stitch count of 48 stitches. Now if you're doing a different length, that will bring it back to a different stitch count. But we're going back to the amount of stitches that we had started with on these first few rows. So we'll keep decreasing, always on this one edge. And that's the nice thing about this is you just have to remember wherever your stitch marker is on this one side, this is going to be the side that you're going to decrease on each time you get to this side. It will have a decrease on that row. And then we'll come on back when we have done 16 total decreasing rows and our stitch count is 48 stitches. Now this will be the shape of your piece after that second decrease. And now we're going to do this point again. So what we will be doing is we'll just be repeating this increase section and decrease section again, always doing it on this side. So while some of the repeats that might have an odd number of repeats per row, so we did 16 and 16 here, which is an even row, so we're just repeating these sections again. It may start from the opposite side, but the concept is the same. So we're going to do 16 rows of increasing and then 16 rows of decreasing. And then I'll come on back and we'll do this last puff section. But this is where it gets really simple to do because you've done this one time. Now we're just going to do it again. It's a great time to listen to your favorite audiobook or your favorite television show. Now after completing that second part where we do the second increase and the second decrease, now we're just going to do one plain row of half double crochet in the third loop. So we're just going to finish this off. This is so that it can mirror the other side. On when we first started, we had done a plain row before starting those increases. So we want to make sure that we're keeping it even. And now we're going to do a half double crochet in the third loop all the way across these stitches. Now after doing the plain row without any decreasing or increasing of that half double crochet in the third loop, we're going to do those puff stitches again. So it will be the same instructions where we're going to start by doing a chain 1 and tightening that down and doing a single crochet in the first stitch, skipping the next stitch, single crocheting in the next, and then going back and working a puff stitch into that skip stitch. And we'll work this all the way across until the very last stitch in the row, which we will single crochet. And then we'll repeat that again, coming back the other way, and then we'll have 2 more rows of those puff stitches. So now that we have done those puff stitches, for this next row, we're simply going to turn, do a stacked single crochet, and then half double crochet in each stitch across. And then we'll be working on the back section. Now the back section doesn't have any increasing or decreasing. and it will all be done in half double crochet in that third loop. So when it comes to that back section, you'll want to do a total of about 41 rows for the size medium. The reason why I say about is I put that in a pattern as a guide doing the math for what circumference is listed, but every body is different. So you'll want to go ahead and wrap this around yourself to see if you like it. Now this has a lot of stretch. It is a fitted item, so if you don't want it so fitted, or if you want it even tighter, this is where you adjust it, is on this back panel. This back panel will largely be the part that now, at this point, that's going to determine how tight or loose of a fit that it is. So now I'm going to go ahead and work up those 41 rows in the half double crochet in the third loop, and then I'll come on back and show you how to join with just one simple join for the body of this tank top. And now after doing all those rows, we have a tank top, sort of, almost. We're just going to do some joining, and then the body of it will be put together. So I'm going to go ahead and fold this over to the other side here. And notice on some sizes, this will hit along the side-ish, depending on what size you're doing. So I need to make sure that we did the front increasing correctly so we have coverage. But this will hit either around the side or right slightly behind. It's a cute little detail that is just a fun little thing on the side. Now I'm going to go ahead and join these together, and we're going to slip stitch them together. Now we're simply going to be slip stitching the sides here. So I'm going to look at my first stitch on this side, and I like to enter the whole stitch on this first one because it keeps those edges nice and clean along that bottom. And I'm just going to slip stitch both of those together. So I entered into both stitches on each side and then slip stitch together. And then I'm going to go through the back loop of the side closest to me, and then I like to go through just the front loop of this other side. I'll show you why in a minute. And then I'm going to yarn over and slip stitch together. Now you can experiment with this. I definitely recommend flipping it to the other side and seeing how it looks on the back side before finishing it, because sometimes it does matter which way you're folding it. Well, this can be worn on each side. The seam tends to go on the inside. So this is going to end up being the wrong side of my work because I don't necessarily want to see this seam, even though it won't be too noticeable. I want it to be less noticeable, which would be on the back side of this. So after doing a few, I can flip this and I can see that's quite nice. That will work out nicely along here. It's barely noticeable. And if you want, you can even slip stitch through that third loop and get rid of that line there. So you could go through the back loop only of this side and the third loop on this side for an even cleaner look. But all of them are quite, they're really not noticeable. So we're just going to slip stitch these sides together all the way across all these stitches, and that will finish out the body. Then we'll just fasten off and weave in the ends and move on to the straps. Now to make these straps the correct length, what you'll want to do is get out a tape measure. Now these will have a negative ease, because we do want them to be able to fit snugly onto our shoulders. We don't want them to fall off, and they will be holding up the shape, especially of the front of this tank top. So I do about a 2-inch negative ease, and the way you can find out how long you want your strap is you can throw on the body of the tank top, grab this tape measure and put it over your shoulder and see what length you prefer, and then subtract 2 inches, and that's about the length you want this. Now, if you're using a cotton yarn, you may want to check that stretch. It may not have as much stretch, so you may not want to do a 2-inch negative ease and maybe a 1 to 1.5 inch. But we do want to make sure that we have a negative ease on this so that it's not just falling off our shoulder without a purpose to it. Now to make this strap, we're going to create a slip knot and put that onto our hook, and then we will chain 3. And I have left enough yarn on the tail end here so that I can stitch this to the tank top when I am ready. So we will chain 3, and then working in the very first chain, so technically the third chain from a hook, we're going to yarn over and do a puff stitch into that very first chain. And I love working in the back humps. You don't have to for this one. You're not even going to notice this once you sew it. I just find it a bit easier once I get in there. So then I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop, doing that puff stitch, insert again, yarn over and pull up a loop, and one more time. And now that we have created, if I through here, created this puff stitch, and I'd like to pull through the first 6 and then the last 2. We're going to turn this and we're gonna rotate this to the left. Then we're going to go ahead and stick our hook into that chain 3 space. Then we're going to make a puff stitch. And then once again, we're going to turn this to the left. And now we're going to be working into this space between these 2 puff stitches, creating another puff stitch. And then we are going to turn to the left and just do that again. We're going to create a puff stitch in this space between, oops, I need to go more into that space between those last 2 puff stitches. And then we'll simply turn our work to the left. And we'll just keep on doing that. This is what's going to make the length of this strap. So we're just going to keep turning to the left there. And continuing to do a puff stitch, and that's how we get this beautiful strap for our tank top. Now the last thing we need to do here is attach the straps to this. I find it easiest to first attach to the front by taking your yarn needle and just sewing this tightly to the front so that it's not going to come apart. Weave your tail end in really well because it will have some stretch to it. You want it to be fitted, so you want it solidly attached there. And then the easiest way I find to attach it to the back is if you are going to wear a bra with this or anything else, go ahead and throw on any undergarments that you're going to be wearing with it, put this over the top, and then place this on the back where you want it to hide that undergarment strap. And that way the placement is perfect for whatever you're going to wear with it. And that's what I have done on the previous ones that I've made. I simply sewed on the front, got the back exactly where I wanted it, and then stitched those on. Well, then this is so much fun. I love wearing this with those high-waisted skirts, or high-waisted shorts or jeans, or however you want to wear it. These are so versatile, and you can even make them longer or shorter if you. Thank you so much for joining me for this fun project. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and come back for more fun projects soon.